There's a lot of things in this old world that just do not make sense. Like why there's so few believers on the firing line, while so many others sit the fence. But if you want to know where the Word of God stands, and believe it wants to use your feet and hands, it's time to take your faith out of the seats and into the streets, and come along with me. If you only look, then you will see on WCN-TV.
Welcome to Fearless Live Streaming. This is Rob Pugh's Wisconsin Christian News live stream that comes to you every week at 2 p.m. Central Time. And I hesitated there because I'm in Maine, so I'm on Eastern Standard Time. My guest today, who you're not going to want to miss, is also on Eastern Standard Time. And you're going to want to share this link on Facebook or Twitter or whatever social media poison you like to use, and tell them that Ray Moore is going to be on with Michael Heath on Rob Pugh's Wisconsin Christian News live stream. Not Roy Moore, who you've all heard of. This man is every bit the hero that Ray Moore is, and that Roy Moore is. This man is Ray Moore. So even I get confused. Ray Moore is going to be on with me today for an hour. We're going to be having a lively conversation about education. We're going to be having an important conversation about truth in education. You know, many of us Christians have been browbeaten to the point where we actually are afraid that if we link the subject of education with the subject of Christianity, that we're somehow being hateful, that we're somehow being ignorant. We're going to dispel that notion today. I want to open the show with a scripture verse, but before I do, I want to invite you to check out Rob Pugh's Wisconsin Christian News website. And I also want to urge you to subscribe to his print newspaper. You know, in these times, we are all wondering who we can trust. And many of us are used to print, reading information in print. And Rob, for 20 years, has been producing Wisconsin Christian News. And he has a national following for this paper. And you can count on Rob to edit and pull together and publish information that you're going to find inspirational and helpful, pointed, unafraid, fearless. Pull up that scripture verse for me, if you would, Spencer. I want to thank Spencer. He's on the board today in Mount Airy, North Carolina, producing this live stream. I'm way up in the capital city of Maine, Augusta, and our guest is down in Columbia, South Carolina, Ray Moore. Going to introduce him, as I said, in just a moment. But before I do, look at this scripture verse from 2 Timothy. This is Paul writing to his disciple, Timothy. For God, not the New York Times, not Joe, what's his name, president there. What's his name? Spencer, I can't even remember his name. Joe Biden, not Joe Biden. God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, of love, and self-discipline. God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. We Christians ought not be social distancing and masking up, because our God hasn't given us a spirit of fear. He's given us a spirit of power, love, and self-discipline. We Christians, unlike the rest of the world, it seems, who are going under communism, should have this self-discipline to do our homework. We should have the love to hug people, even though scientism is telling us that we might die from something called COVID that none of us can really explain. You know, this week I met someone who said 2 of their children had COVID. And I said, how do you know? And they said, well, were tested. Well, a lot of these tests are the scientists the guy who invented the PCR test came out before he died in 2019 and said it can't find coronavirus. It's not capable of finding it. And I guess that's one of the more popular tests. There's one other one. But I asked him, so what happened to your loved ones who got coronavirus, COVID? And they said, well, they had a little bit of a fever for a day or two, and that was it. You know, 99% of people survive. They just have symptoms and they get better. So what's going on here? Is the media making us afraid? We're going to talk. I didn't warn him that we would open up with COVID, but I think he's done enough interviews, enough media in his 20 years of standing up and being courageous to handle this question. Ray, why don't you come in here? Ray Moore with Exodus Mandate. We're going to be talking about education primarily, but Ray,
yes,
what do you think about all this COVID stuff? What's going on here?
Well, we're not taking the vaccine, and I think when it initially hit the culture, the COVID, you know, we didn't know what we had, and a lot of people maybe went too far and taking precautions and things, but now it's becoming very apparent that we might be, I don't want to say it's a hoax. I believe there is a real illness there, but as you've already mentioned, it's not normally lethal. I think the average age of people who are dying from it is 78.6.
Yep.
So it doesn't really affect our youth that much. My grandson got it, at least they said he did. He had to stay home for 10 days from school, but he never had any symptoms to speak of, if any.
So Ray, we got this thing that shows up a year ago. We're still fight. All we do in the media now, in the mainstream media, is hear about. It's all we hear about. We hear about vaccines. We hear about this. You're an education specialist. You have spent your life, you and your wife, your dear wife Gail, encouraging people all over the world, especially Christians, a focus on Christians, but everybody, to take the subject of education seriously. I have never, this whole thing for the last year is blowing my mind, because there's so much counter narrative information from credible scientists that has been published and is widely available on the internet from the beginning of this, from a year ago. And yet when I go to the store here in Maine, everyone's wearing a mask and they're all acting afraid. It's like, what's happened, Ray? What has happened to education in this world? What has happened?
Well, I think there's a propaganda campaign. When you see something that's so overwhelmingly, I read liberal publications. I hate to have to admit that, to kind of see what the enemy's doing. I read USA Today every day, and it seems like half the articles are about the vaccine and about COVID. It's just overwhelming. And when you see something like that, that's so overwhelming in one direction, you can ask yourself, something's fishy here. And so I'm very skeptical of the campaign, because we're very concerned. Right now, I saw an article on Town Hall just a few days ago on calling the vaccine passport, Vaccine Passport. I wish I could remember the exact title. The document or the card from hell, and it was pretty denunciatory of a vaccine passport. And I think that people who are reluctant to take the vaccine, don't plan to take it, need to really concentrate on pushing back at that point, because what they want to do is require people to get the vaccine, and if you don't take it, then you're going to have a hard time shopping in stores. Maybe not, you might not be able to fly. They're going to try to restrict your liberty, and we need to really push back. Right now in South Carolina today, there's a bill in the Senate, and I can't remember the number, but it's a very good bill, a resolution that businesses cannot, the state cannot penalize anybody if they do not take the vaccine. We have privacy, and our medical treatment is between us and our doctor. You've heard that before about abortion. Why shouldn't it apply here? And we can, it's our decision whether we want to take it or not. Now, I don't advise people to take it, but I am certainly not planning to, and my wife is not either. But we are very concerned about 41%, they say 41% of Republican voters are not planning to take the vaccine. And I think with Democrats and independents, it may be in the teens. And
I've paid pretty close attention to this whole vaccine question, and I can't think of one reason myself to take it. And because I guess people are reading stuff that I don't read. I expose myself to a wide range of sources, but I do not expose myself to mainstream media. Unlike you, you read USA Today, and good for you. I think that's
I don't read it because I believe it, but I want to, I'm trying to monitor bad political ideas, and I read it because they're a large paper. I sometimes read the New York Times. I actually bought one today. I mean, I don't recommend those papers, but you need to kind of know what the enemy's saying and doing.
Yeah, I find the mainstream media to be extremely persuasive because they're so well produced, and is sophisticated the right word in terms of their narrative? And I really enjoy the internet because I feel like I can go to original sources and make up my own mind very quickly.
Well, there's a large number of credible people, medical people, that are warning and pushing back. And I just saw recently a very wonderful, I might have sent it to you, interview that Matt Staver, your audience may not know him, but he was the
Liberty Counsel. Yeah, good man.
But he was a recent dean of Liberty University Law School, which is, there are only two, evangelical Christian law schools in the country, maybe three, and it's the second one, very fine school, and he was the dean of that, and when it was formed, and he runs Liberty Counsel, which is sort of a Christian conservative version of the ACLU, and I've known him for years and respected him, but he had on just a few days ago a doctor named Dr. Lee Merritt, who's very, very credible. She was I think she's an orthopedic doctor, but she was immediate past president of the American Society for Physicians and Surgeons. A lot of people may not know that group, but it's sort of a conservative counter to the AMA. The AMA is pretty well taken over by the left, but this group has got thousands of doctors, and she was president of it, and she made a compelling case against the vaccine. And she says it's not a vaccine; it's an experimental drug. And she pointed out that Moderna, which has got one of the two major ones, you have the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna, that they had never had a drug or anything approved by the FDA. They were a brand new company, and they created a vaccine, and it was approved by the CDC of the FDA, and they had no record of any kind as a company. And apparently a lot of people are getting sick from the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. And yet people, and so I think it's some kind of, we're watching mind control and some kind of brainwashing that's going on. But I'm happy to see that there are 41% of conservative people are reluctant to take it. But the problem we have, and this is where you may come in, people don't have information, and they have a kind of a deep-seated reluctance or apprehension, but it's not based on any real data or document. And that's why watching the interview that Matt Staver did with Dr. Lee Merritt is so important, because she gives facts and data and medical information, and she's a scientist and a credible doctor. And there's a lot of them doing that. There's Dr. Simone Gold.
Yeah.
I've heard her speak in Washington. Brilliant woman.
Yeah. Carla Dean Graves.
Yeah. Got a law degree from Stanford, which is one of the prestigious law schools on the West Coast. And then, of course, Carla Dean Graves, who is our friend. Dr. Sherry Tenpenny.
Yeah.
And she's
and
made
then,
the
and
most.
then Ray, there's the one, I don't recall his name, but he very highly respected global vaccinologist, or whatever you call him.
Right. Yeah, Bosch, Bossche. So I mean, there's so much stuff out there. Yeah. This is not a bunch of cowboys, and I'm not making fun of cowboys. I love cowboys, but these are not a bunch of uneducated people making these claims and warnings. These are scientists and doctors. Now, my guess is that they are not the majority of the doctors. I think most of them have probably been suckered into this. But I've got a doctor on my board of my ministry, and he's one of the prominent MDs in the state of South Carolina. And many years ago, under a Republican governor, he was appointed chairman of the DHEC board, which is over all the health and medicine of the state. That's a kind of a supervisory position. And he is not giving it, but he is giving when people get sick with COVID. He's treated, I haven't talked to him in a month or two, but he's treated about 20 people with COVID using hydroxychloroquine, using a mixture of that, zinc, and vitamin D3. Yep. And I think he also uses invertamycin, I might mispronounced it also, which is similar to that. And he says that if you catch it early in the stage with one of these drugs, it's 100% cure rate, not 50%, but 100%.
Yeah, Ray, my wife and I, Polly called. She's out back here in my multi-gazillion-dollar studio, actually my living room. But who is it you called, honey? America's Frontline Doctors. We called and we paid for the consultation. Yeah. And we have hydroxychloroquine in our home. I will not, Ray, get a COVID test. I will not. I mean, I may end up in a situation where they force it upon me for health reasons or some other reason, and then I'll have to deal with that issue.
Well, I may have to do that because we're getting ready to fly somewhere in a month or two. We're going to have a positive test saying we don't have it. But I go into stores and they put that little thing on your forehead, and I don't wear the mask, but sometimes you're in a situation where they just force you to, and I just don't have time to fight over everything. Yep. But we've laid the rule down. We're not taking the vaccine, and my wife. These are stories. These are anecdotal stories, but she was at her doctor the other day, her skin doctor, and he's one of the prominent, well-known doctors in the state of South Carolina. He's a 2-star general in the Air Force Reserve. He's on the state medical board. He's very prominent. He happens to be a good conservative Republican. Mm-hmm. And he also is a doctor for our governor. I'm not going to call his name. Mm-hmm. And he asked Gail, he said, Gail, are you going to take the vaccine? And she laughed, and she said, no, I think we're going to wait. Ray and I are going to wait to see what happens to the first 5 million. Kind of laughed. And he said, she's not going to take it, but that was her answer, kind of divert him. And he kind of patted her on the shoulder. He says, I'm with you on that, Gail. I'm going to wait and see what happens, too. Yeah. Now, he must have some deep reservation about it, but he's not speaking out. Right. And people have got to speak out on this, because what the left's plan is to break down the 40%. They're going to have a hard time dealing with 40% of conservatives. And I'm told, there was an article on the webpage yesterday, that a large percentage of people who are fighting it are evangelical Christians.
Hmm.
And of course, unfortunately, some of our leaders have said to take it. Even Franklin Graham, who I really appreciated, but he's now saying he took it.
Hmm.
Um, and so, but it's not working. People are just holding back. My church, some of the, we can't control everybody, but the majority of people are definitely not taking it, including my pastor and his family. And his father is a MD.
Hmm.
These are the kind of tensions that are in families over this. And his father's a doctor, and he's taken the vaccine and urging his children and his grandchildren to take it. And my pastor says, "No, Dad, we're not going to do it." And he says, "Ray, it's really created a bit of a tension in our family over this."
I,
And I
I,
finally had to say, "Dad, I don't want to talk about it anymore. We're not taking it."
yeah,
But
I
he
drew the
studied
line.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I drew the line uh, at a year ago myself. I saw this as politics primarily,
Hmm.
and science going off the rails for political reasons, not at the national level primarily, but at the global level. My sense of it, Ray, was that perhaps the most powerful political forces in the world, had decided that Donald Trump had been given too much in being allowed to become president for 4 years. And these forces at the global level decided, for political reasons, to end his presidency. And
Yeah,
I think the evidence, as time and history is settle out here in the coming years, are going to prove me right. I think what 2020 was about was stopping populism.
yeah. We
And
could wish we weren't so right so much, couldn't we, Michael?
yeah, but
It'd be nice to be.
it was about stopping populism
Yeah,
dead in
yeah,
its tracks, not
yeah,
just in America, but all
yeah,
over the world. So
yeah,
I say that this is communism. What
yeah.
we're under now is communism.
But
So
people have to not only resist this, but they've got to be aggressive with it, because
okay.
let's say there are millions of people that are reluctant. Well, they'll keep beating us down, bullying us, threatening us, and people, if they do not have arguments and have substantial
That's right.
arguments, and that's what this Dr. Lee Merritt can produce. If you watch that 30-minute interview with Matt Staver,
Yeah,
you won't be able to do it. It's just have reasons. It can't just be a
that's right. Boy,
kind of a
I couldn't agree
numb
with you
reluctance.
more.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree with you more. And of course, that's a point you would make, being an education a specialist.
mm,
And the reason I think I was so clear thinking as we moved in under the COVID regime is because I had stopped paying attention to mainstream media many years prior. Not that I didn't watch an occasional YouTube of Fox News or the New York Times or whatever, some opinion that might run contrary to my own views. I would do that, but YouTube and the internet uh, just became a habit for me in terms of
yeah,
getting news and getting information and getting opinion. And and there's millions like me, Ray, who they're mostly younger than me. I'm 59, but I think older folks have tried to maintain a mix like you're doing. And again, nothing, no criticism of you for reading the USA Today, but
I read it to see what the enemy's saying.
yeah,
I've
exactly,
got the New York
exactly.
Times right here in front of me right now. I went and bought it today
Exactly.
because I'm
So,
and it,
but my point is that I think older Americans are still maybe struggling a little more so than millennials,
mm,
who, as I reach out in what I'm doing, I'm finding millennials get to it a little bit quicker than boomers.
yeah.
I think boomers are still trying to hold the world together by holding these things in tension. But here's my question for you, Ray.
Okay.
How how are we going to continue to hold these institutional these institutions, powerful institutions, in tension when they're so clearly now on the side of destroying populism? I mean, they're
Hmm.
clearly political. The New York Times, all CNN, all of it, and they are all in. Google, the big tech, they're all
Hmm.
in to the point of rabid, radical censorship they're all in on silencing. I'm going to just get right to the point, Ray, and say it. They're all in on silencing Christianity in the West.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's why your Pew, I forget his first name.
Rob Pew, yeah.
Yeah, his newspaper is important. I don't know how much distribution it has, but they're trying to centralize the internet. And see, we all were using, Twitter, Facebook, all those tools. Well, they were controlled by the enemy, and they gave us freedom to use them for a time. But now they're shutting us out of those avenues. And so it's important to have decentralized media as well. Amen. And so I'm sure Pew pretty well controls the editorial position, and it probably goes primarily out into Wisconsin. Yeah. And so people who read that can get the truth. We have a similar Christian newspaper here in Columbia, South Carolina. Yeah. But we've allowed ourselves to go to these globalist-controlled media, internet sites, and these guys are all, in the enemy camp, and they allowed us for a time to use it, but then we became too powerful, and they had to shut us down. So there's no freedom of speech for Christians and conservatives in some of these avenues.
Well, and I think the silver lining in big tech's decision and the Democratic Party's decision and CNN's decision to go all in with global communism is that Christian institutions are being forced to figure this out. They're being forced to because they know, almost all of them now know, that it's only a matter of time before they no longer are able to fundraise or carry on the business of their ministry using Facebook or using Google. They're coming to terms with the fact that that's the case. That these big tech companies are moving very fast to identify us, those of us who believe in God, and who take our religion seriously enough to carry it over into politics and to speak our views and defend our views in reference to the Bible or in reference to Christian doctrine. And they are singling us out, they're surveilling us, and they've already started. They've 4 years into censoring us. And you got entities like InfoWars, which are now 4 years experienced in running their own platform. They've been doing it now for 4 years, and they're still there, and they have huge and growing audiences. So the silver lining here is that the internet is becoming distributed. And what that means is that guys like you, and you've already been dabbling with it. You had a video show for a while, and you have a website. Throw that website, if you would, Spencer.
The website for my ministry, which I want to get to today, is exodusmandate.org.
It's up on the screen, Ray. Go ahead and
tell us. Okay. And then the other site that I want to put out today is a new ministry, but I'm the chairman of the board, and this one is really taken off nationally. And I'm trying to emphasize that because we've got a wonderful staff and some really competent people. I've got a small staff, and it's hard sometimes to do things with a small staff. But it's called publicschoolexit.com. publicschoolexit.com. And they're based in San Diego. And it's got a lot of information about curricula. So people, if they're going to leave the public school system, which is what we're urging, they've got to have a curricula. And so they don't know what to do there. And their churches are not helping them in most cases. So they're kind of out there by themselves trying to find their way. So we have provided lots of information on curricula, arguments to homeschool or to put your children in a private or Christian school. And then we have sections there on models. People usually buy a model, like we all drive a car, but we may debate between a Lexus and a Cadillac if we're rich, or between a Ford and a General Motors or a Chevrolet if we're poor. And so those are models, but we generally all believe in the automobile. So what model do you want to use in your home, in your school, or in your church, or in your Christian school, or in your church? So publicschoolexit.com is just a marvelous location, and I'm the board chairman, and we've got Alex Newman is on the board, and I believe he's been a guest of Pew and been written up in the Wisconsin Christian News before.
Yep.
And then Dran Reese from San Diego is the CEO, very competent woman who has just got so much energy and courage and intelligence and spirituality. It's a wonderful person that she is. She's the CEO.
Yeah. So we're talking with Ray Moore. He's the leader of Exodus Mandate and the website you were just looking at on the screen. Give us that name again, Ray. I'm not able to see it.
All right. The second one, which I want your audience to check out, is publicschoolexit.com. Very similar to exodusmandate.org, which is my original site. That's about 25 years old. But the new one has a lot more information about what you need to do today, how to go about it, and has more up-to-date information than Exodus Mandate. If people are interested in me personally, we've got a lot of books and things and movies they could order on exodusmandate.org. My wife and I wrote a book some years ago called The Promise of Jonadab, Building a Christian Family Legacy in a Time of Cultural Decline. And they can order that for a donation. I think we're asking at least $12. It's not a very big book. It's a small book, but it has a lot of punch to it.
Yep.
How to parent children and teach them the Christian faith in a way that they will carry on after we're gone. So we have a lot of stuff on both sites, but if you're looking to get started in homeschooling or Christian schooling and how to go about it, how to encourage your pastor to do the same, probably publicschoolexit.com would be good for you now.
So we're talking with Ray Moore, and it's the bottom of the hour. We're going to take a break. We're going to go until 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central Time. You're watching Wisconsin Christian News live stream. And when we come back from the break, I'm going to ask Ray Moore what he thinks about critical race theory and the fact that one of the most prominent Christian education groups in the world has decided to start promoting it. So stay tuned. When we come back from the break, more with Ray Moore from Exodus Mandate.
Have you been looking for a trusted long-term storable food company? We have a solution for you. Simply Clean Foods is dedicated to providing the best quality food you can buy next to fresh from a farmer's market. Our line of resealable fruits, vegetables, and meats are suitable for everyday use, and you won't have to worry about throwing away valuable groceries ever again. Our food is completely GMO-free, and our stringent quality controls, plus testing for heavy metals, makes us unique in the storable foods market. Simply Clean Foods' primary focus is to bring clean food to people all around the world and change the way we look at freeze-dried food in our daily cooking. When you purchase from simplycleanfoods.net, not only will you be receiving high-quality food, but you will also be supporting veterans in need across the country and those who are affected by natural disasters. Right now, Amazon Prime members will receive fast 2-day shipping. Go to simplycleanfoods.net. That's simplycleanfoods.net. But do it today.
At the McClario firm, it all starts with family. We are here to serve you and your family, online or in person. Call today for a free consultation. The McClario firm, your law firm for life.
Start.
Pornography is a destructive force. It destroys individuals, families, and fuels the out-of-control demand for sex trafficking. 45% of Christian families say porn is a problem in their home, but why aren't churches and public schools talking about this? Fear. People who view porn think they're the only one. It's a lie. Statistically, more people view porn than who do not and struggle in silence. www.linfrederick.com. You can find the book I wrote about my own battle with porn and the presentations that I do for churches and public schools. linfrederick.com.
Tired of bad news? Do the teenagers in your life need a break from social media and mind-numbing entertainment? Wouldn't it be great to inspire them to connect with God and others and to live outside their phones? The Off the Itinerary series by M. Liz Boyle does just that, and reviewers love the blend of adventure and Christian themes. Readers enjoy the action-packed stories and relatable characters. Go to mlizboyle.com for discussion guides and purchase links.
All right, you're watching Wisconsin Christian News live stream, and Rob Pugh is normally in this chair. Well, not actually this chair, because he lives in Wisconsin and I live in Augusta, Maine, but he's in the host chair for the Wisconsin Christian News live stream 2 weeks a month, and I'm in the host chair 2 weeks a month. So don't have my guest finalized for next week, but I promise to have another stimulating guest like the one I have this week, Ray Moore from Columbia, South Carolina, the leader of Exodus Mandate and someone with deep experience in Christian education. Ray, critical race theory. I know it's tied into Marxism. I think of it as an excuse to beat up on the majority culture of the United States of America. That's what I think of it as. Am I way off base on that? When I say the majority culture, I mean, critical race theorists, I guess, want to reduce all of us down to our skin color, but I see the attack that's coming upon the majority culture of America as not being primarily involved with race. I just see critical race theory as one sort of weapon in the toolbox that's being used by global communism to erode confidence in the minds and in the hearts of the majority culture. In common parlance, it's called white guilt. What it actually is this sense of it's almost like colonialism. Like we're going to feel guilty for the colonial period, which ended mid 20th century. It's a play by communism on the American spirit, on the Western tradition. Am I going too far in all of that? But anyway,
No, you're not.
Critical
Absolutely
race
correct.
Critical race theory is now apparently, we were talking on the phone a week ago or so, is now emerged as something that's being taken seriously by the Association of Christian Schools International. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. It's a major tragedy for evangelical Christianity. My wife and I have been involved in an ACSI school for 30 years with our children first. Three of our children went to a very large, prominent member school, and now we had 4 grandchildren that attend the same school. 2 of them have graduated. My wife taught in this school for years, 10 years, and she was head of the English department. And I had a daughter and 2 daughters-in-law that taught at the same school. It's a very, very good school. It left a good mark on our children, and we just have a 30-year happy experience with the school. Very, very conservative. Yep. And ACSI stands for Association of Christian Schools International, and they have 25,000 member schools worldwide, about 4,000, maybe a little less than 4,000 in the United States, but it's really exploding worldwide. And it's an evangelical, Bible-based Christian organization, has a good history, a good founding, and there are about 5.5 million children. My son and his wife are in Germany as missionaries, and she teaches at Black Forest Academy, which is one of their schools in, I guess it's Southwest Germany. And these schools are all over the world. And there's been a slide going on, and it's been hard to detect, because unfortunately, some of these people that are pushing this probably are real Christians, but they've been deceived or duped, is the way I would describe it. And they have adopted critical race theory. Now, the way they've done that is that they're partnering. They themselves haven't taken it up as a creed, but they're partnering with a major leader in this arena, a black teacher from Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina, which is a Southern Baptist school, named Walter Strickland, and he runs a group called Unified. And a lot of it looks benign on the surface, but he's one of the really radical black leaders within the Southern Baptist Convention that are pushing critical race theory on the whole denomination. Now, this goes back to June of 2019, when shockingly, the Southern Baptist Convention, which is a very conservative denomination, or at least it has been, adopted Resolution 9, and your people can go and look that up on the internet. And Resolution 9 said that the Baptists should be interpreting events and worldview through the lens of critical race theory, intersectionality, and Christian worldview. So they kind of threw that in too, and it was adopted. I mean, it passed, and I saw the video of the vote, and I mean, there was hardly any opposition. I think a lot of people didn't know what they were voting for, which is typical of a lot of Christians. They're just not informed, and they don't take the time to get informed. They're easily led around by, dupes. They're easily duped by their fellow dupes, and this passed, and it was kind of, it kind of took my breath away to watch it. I watched the vote take place. And Walter Strickland was on the committee, the resolutions committee that adopted this resolution. Now, what made it all the more interesting was a resolution was proposed by a Southern Baptist pastor from Southern California, and he made a resolution to critique critical race theory and intersectionality. He basically said that these should not be tools for interpreting cultural and social issues. And they took his own resolution and flipped it and put this in it. And he was enraged, or outraged, I guess, that they would do that to him. And it passed. Now, what is critical race theory? Well, it comes from the Gramsci, and a lot of people don't know that name, but Antonio Gramsci was an Italian communist that lived in the 30s. And there were two schools of thought in Marxism at the time. The Lenin Stalinist brand said we have to take over by violence and kill the opposition and overthrow, and the proletariat, that'd be the working class, would overthrow the bourgeois, the middle and the capitalist class, by violence. Mm-hmm. And Gramsci said, no, that won't work. We need to have the long march through the institutions and gradually infiltrate and take over the church, the government, the arts, and the media when they're not suspecting it. Just sort of infiltrate them and send our people into these institutions and take control. And that's the method that's really worked in the West. So he died, I think, in the 30s, but his approach, called the Long March through the institutions, rather than violent takeover. And of course, I'm sure some would still do that. That was what was used in China and places like that. But he said the Western world is still too Christian. You have Catholics in some of these countries that would not succumb to Marxism. They were working people, but they were loyal to the church and to their faith. Then you had in some of the Protestant Lutheran countries, and in Great Britain, you had the Anglicans, and they just weren't going to buy into Marxism. So he said the only way to defeat these people is through a gradual takeover of their institutions. Well, in the 30s, when Hitler came to power, the Frankfurt School, very important term that people need to know about, because this is one of the most important unknown histories of America, they left Germany and came to America and landed at Columbia Teachers College in New York in the late 30s. And Dewey and all helped them get placed in major universities. And Herbert Marcuse, M-A-R-C-U-S-E, was one of the main leaders. There were others like that. And they worked and infiltrated our major universities. And this is where the term political correctness comes from. That's a form of cultural Marxism. So critical race theory is one of the weapons, and it was actually called critical theory and intersectionality, one of the weapons in their arsenal. And it simply says that we strongly and violently critique all institutions of society: family, church, business, capitalism. Any institution must go through this harsh criticism, critical theory. And in the case of race, we go through critical race theory. And this essentially says that white people have been the oppressor of all the people of the world, and that we are fundamentally evil and racist and can't be fixed. And so that's kind of what's behind it. And of course, they use terms like white privilege and some of these things. Well, listen, we have to be honest. It was white Europeans that gave us civilization in both Europe and in America. And, it's certainly true that was some bad things that happened. I'm in the old South, and we had slavery. But even that, as bad as it was, there was some benign elements. I'm not going to say that was a good system. But these kinds of things, we have to live with them, and we'd like to be forgiven for that now after all these years. But there's no forgiveness for whites, and that's what critical race theory teaches. And they have ACSI, a good Christian group, and this happened in their national office in Colorado Springs. So if any of your audience are listening, that they could email me at exodusmandate.org, and we could send out information to prove what we're saying. But it's important to write them and contact your local private Christian school and tell them you will not tolerate them taking critical race theory into the agenda. They have done it, and it's so serious that it's a danger of poisoning the bloodline of 25,000 Christian schools all over the world. I mean, I've been very sick at my stomach for a week or so having learned this.
Ray, so if it seems to me that if the average person were to open their eyes fully and look at the state of the family and virtue in the West, not just in the United States of America, but in the West, we see brokenness and confusion and chaos everywhere. And now I think even strong families that have stayed close to tradition, Christian tradition, or just moral tradition, Western moral traditions, are starting to see it appear in surprising ways within their own families. And
right. It used to be, say, in our parents' or grandparents' day, we didn't have all these media things that would divert us. We didn't have all this entertainment and sporting events. So most of the time revolved around the family and the church. And families used to have, family worship, family altar. And it was every day, usually at night. And that would help the children be oriented toward Christ and the Bible and God.
Yep.
They don't do that anymore. Even the best families don't have family worship. The kids go to church and they have 1 hour Sunday school a week, and sometimes that's not very deep. It's games, entertainment. And then they go to the public school 30 hours a week, and they're indoctrinated and corrupted by the schools. And who's going to win that one? I mean, they're outnumbered 30-1, and the parents just oblivious to it. They hardly know what's going on. They're living in their own little world.
Yep.
Send their kids off to pagan schools, and then Johnny gets about 17 or 18. He leaves the church, and and mom and dad say,
that's not just your opinion, right? I mean, Ray.
No, it's happened. I hear these stories all the time.
Well, and the pollsters have been polling it. The numbers are all there. This isn't your opinion. This is a fact. We Christians are raising our children to be atheists.
George Barna has done a lot of research on this, and he's written a book about it. So it's a serious problem. And of course, the pastors are not doing their job. They could be instructing the families and how to have family altar. Um, they get up and give little ditties on Sunday. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they went to church here in town. I couldn't believe it. Said the sermon where the pastor read a poem, read a verse, and made a 5-minute talk on Sunday. Well, the church I go to, the pastor preaches about 45, 50 minutes every Sunday. So it's really a good sermon, and it's on a book of the Bible or a text. He uses a text and relates it to Scripture. He doesn't just give his opinions. He explains the text, explains theology. And that's the way sermons should be. But people don't do that. So we're not even being educated in our churches in many cases. And the clergy are very, very weak. I've been in the ministry 45 years. And I've not been covering for them, but I just kind of held back. I wanted to give them a chance. But about 5 years ago, I was in Colorado Springs visiting ACSI. Now, let me mention again, these are good people who have somehow been diverted in a very serious way. And we don't know what the jury is still out, but they have partnered with a very dangerous group, Walter Strickland of Unified. And he's probably the worst, among the worst of these black radical critical race theory proponents. Yet, if you look at his own education, he's graduate of Cedarville, went to Southeastern Baptist Seminary. He comes up out of the evangelical world. So, I believe it was John that said they went out from among us, but they were not really part of us. And so we have a lot of these kinds of things that are happening in the church today, but ACSI has no business partnering with them. But anyway, I was in Colorado Springs and met with a high official with ACSI. And he told me that the Barna Group had done a research project on the clergy, the evangelical clergy, and their support of K-12 Christian schooling. I think it was more looking at their attitude toward private Christian schooling, schools like ACSI, not homeschooling. He says only 10% of conservative evangelical pastors like myself are very aggressively and strongly supporting K-12 Christian schools, with another 20 to 25% moderately supported. And by that, it means that they themselves recommend schools, Christian schools. They may have their own children there, but they don't preach and teach on it. And then about 28% are in opposition to private Christian schools. Yeah, that was kind of hard to believe. And he was just disgusted, and during this same period from 2007 till about 4 or 5 years ago when I was there, ACSI dropped from 5,000 Christian schools in America to less than 4,000. I think it was about 3,500. They lost 1,500 school closures. Yep. Now, a lot of that was due to homeschooling maybe becoming preferred. And if you have a spouse that doesn't work outside the home, you can sometimes homeschool. And one of the reasons is it certainly doesn't cost as much. That would be one reason. But he said a lot of Christian families are returning to public schools after 2007 because of the economy. The cost was pushing them out. But then he reported to me at the same time in Africa, Asia, and South America, Christian day schools are exploding in countries of great poverty, where families have to go around picking up tin cans on the side of the road to pay for their children to go to the Christian schools. These people in Africa and Asia and South America are putting their kids in private Christian schools when they really can't afford it. Mm-hmm. But we can afford it here, and we don't do it. So there's a weakness in the clergy and a weakness in the church. It's hard to imagine. I guess so. It's a terrible situation, and now the number one group that should be fighting this is adopting critical race theory.
It's like we hate our God and we hate our children. Those are strong words, but I've been at this, Ray, as I've been at it 30 years, and I just see each year it get worse and worse and worse. And then with the launch of the COVID nonsense a year ago, it's like we fell off the cliff. And the clock has run on us, and you have helped us immensely understand Gramsci and critical race theory. But I want to make sure that the viewers and the listeners know about your website, because it's a great resource. And you and Gail know what you're talking about when it comes to homeschooling. You were among the first in America to step up and do this with your children.
We started in '77 with our oldest. He's now 50 years old, has 4 children. He's homeschooled and put his kids in Christian school. But we were proud. We could have been among the first couple hundred families in the modern era, but there's no way of knowing for sure because nobody reported in those days. It was very secretive. We didn't tell anybody much. I mean, some people knew we were doing it. We just stayed to ourselves in the home. And then about 1980, the early 80s, we date that as the birth of the modern Christian homeschool movement, early 1980s.
So we're talking to Ray Moore, and we're not going to have time to get into a whole lot more of his story, but you can go read all about it. And there's plenty of media online about Ray and Gail Moore. But ExodusMandate.org is their website. And as we move down here, up here toward the top of the hour, I always like to end the show with a quick fun moment. So I found this one, and hopefully Spencer's has it all queued up and ready to play. So Spencer, go for it.
I did not fall down going up the steps. I dropped my keys to the plane. I think. I don't remember. All I know is it hurt like hell.
Ray Moore, you're not on video, so you couldn't see that. But what it was a little parody of Joe Biden falling.
Yeah, I wanted got a minute for one more comment, or you got to go?
Yeah, go for it.
I wanted to commend the people in Wisconsin, because Wisconsin Lutheran Synod, Wisconsin Synod Lutheran, I haven't looked at the data lately, but they have about 300,000 children in Lutheran parochial schools, which we would call Christian schools. And this is a unique thing that they've done there. And that particular denomination is held firm on private Christian education. The same could be said about the Christian Reformed and also Missouri Lutherans. And then, of course, we could say the same about Catholics, because they have maintained a parochial school system more than anybody else. But Baptists and Independents and Pentecostals and others have opted for state education, and it's destroying their children.
Yeah, it is. We're talking to Ray Moore with ExodusMandate.org, ExodusMandate.org, and we've enjoyed a wonderful hour getting to know Ray and learning about cultural Marxism. Please share this show with your friends and family who are trying to sort out the chaos. What I hear more than anything else as I travel around and talk with folks is that they don't know who to trust. They don't know who to trust. They say they've turned off the news. I talked to someone this morning in my yard who was doing some tree work, and he said he stopped completely paying attention to politics and to government. So there's a tremendous crisis of confidence that runs all the way across our institutions, be they religious or
well, they want you to drop out. They want you to drop out. So that's not the answer. You have to re-engage in a biblical, proper way.
That's right. We have to re-engage. Again, we're talking to Ray Moore, the leader of ExodusMandate.org. This is Wisconsin Christian News live stream. Ray, I'll give you the last word. We're at the top of the hour, so go right ahead.
Well, the good news is that the COVID shutdown has actually benefited our movement. And the Biden administration coming to power has indirectly benefited our movement. So let's say COVID is a serious problem. It is a problem. I think it's overblown, but it's caused a lot of people to consider homeschooling because they had to go home. They shut the schools down. And we know that at minimum of 10% and maybe as high as 15 or 20% are not going to return to public schools when the schools reopen in the fall. This is extremely good news. So from our point of view of our ministry, in our groups, this has been a once in 100-year moment. And often God works that way through plagues and crises. He turns the people to do what he wanted them to do through persuasion, but it wasn't enough. So it's been a good thing. And of course, people are terrified of what the Biden administration might do. And of course, the public schools are terrible, but now they say, wow, those public schools are really bad because the Democrats are in power. Well, they were bad even under Trump, and he wasn't able to do anything to fix it. So we're in a good spot, even though the clouds are dark overhead.
Yep. Ray Moore, thanks for joining us. Spencer, thanks for being on the board, and we'll see all of you next week.
All right, thanks, Michael.
Have you been looking for a trusted long-term store?